They always said I'd never amount to anything. I was the quiet one, the background daughter. Daisy was their star, pretty, loud, spoiled. I worked 2 jobs, skipped parties, paid my own bills while they poured everything into her. And when I won $5.5 million in the lottery, they didn't say congratulations, they said, "What's Daisy's share?" I said no. So they stole what they thought was the check and burned it. Standing there, watching smoke rise from the flames, I realized something. I was finally free. Not just from them, but from the girl they always told me to be. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. If you love jaw-dropping stories about family betrayal, power plays, and sweet revenge, this is the place for you. One click helps the channel grow and brings you more wild stories like this every week. My name is Zara Miller, and for as long as I can remember, I've been invisible. When I was 10, my little sister Daisy spilled juice all over my homework. I cried, not because of the paper, but because I had worked all weekend on it. My mom didn't scold Daisy. She looked at me and said, "It's just paper. Stop overreacting." That was the first time I realized. In this family, Daisy was allowed to break things, and I was expected to fix them. Growing up, I was the one who stayed behind to do the dishes after dinner. Daisy? She was out with friends. I vacuumed the carpets, folded the laundry, cleaned the bathrooms, and cooked on school nights when Mom was too tired. No one ever thanked me. In fact, the only time I was noticed was when something went wrong. Then it was, "Zara, why didn't you stop her?" Or, "Zara, can't you be more helpful?" Daisy didn't get grounded for sneaking out. She didn't get yelled at for failing her math tests or crashing our family car. Twice. The first time she totaled it, she cried and said, "I was stressed out." And my dad just hugged her. When I got my first B in school, they made me sit down for a serious talk about expectations. But I kept my head down and worked hard. I got into college on a full scholarship, tuition, housing, everything covered. I came home, proud, and handed them the acceptance letter. My dad glanced at it and said, "Nice." My mom asked if I could defer for a year and stay home to help with Daisy's depression. I didn't. I left. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I had nothing, barely enough for food or textbooks, but I had peace. No one was knocking on my door at midnight asking for help. No one was yelling at me for not doing enough. I worked at the campus library during the day and cleaned offices at night. It wasn't easy, but I made it through. After graduation, I came home for a bit, just to get back on my feet. That was a mistake. Daisy had dropped out of fashion school. Too much pressure, she claimed, and moved back in. She didn't work, didn't study, just scrolled through her phone and complained that life was unfair. My parents said she was fragile and needed time. They asked me to help cover the bills, since I had a job now. I was working retail during the day and waitressing at night, barely keeping up with my own rent. But still, they called me selfish when I said no. That word stuck. Selfish. After all those years of sacrificing everything for this family, they still saw me as the one who didn't care. One rainy Tuesday, I had $20 left to my name. I was walking home from my shift at the diner, exhausted and soaked, when I passed a little convenience store. A bright lottery sign blinked in the window. Jackpot, $5.5 million ours. I don't know why I walked in. I'd never played the lottery before. But something in me, something tired and desperate, whispered, "Why not?" I bought one ticket. Just one. Then I forgot about it. A few days later, I saw the numbers on a news site while waiting for my laundry to finish. My heart skipped. I pulled the ticket from my bag, shaking. One number matched, then another, then another. All of them matched. I stared at the ticket for what felt like forever. I sat down on the laundromat bench, heart racing, while a man nearby kept glancing at me like I might faint. I wanted to scream, to jump, to run, but instead I just held it in my hands and whispered, "It's real." I'd won. $5,500,000. For a second, I imagined going home and telling my parents. I imagined my mom crying, my dad hugging me, Daisy clapping with joy. Then I remembered reality. If I told them, they'd want control. They'd twist it into guilt. They'd say Daisy needed more, that I should share. That family comes first. So I did the unthinkable. I said nothing. I told no one. I made an appointment with a lawyer. And I started planning my escape. But what I didn't know was, someone was already watching, and they had their own plans for my ticket. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. After confirming everything with the lottery office, I sat in Mr. Douglas's office, gripping my winning ticket like it was a newborn baby. He was my parents' old lawyer, but he'd always been kind to me. Quiet, professional, no nonsense. "I need your help keeping this quiet," I told him. He nodded slowly, glancing at the numbers on the ticket. "Congratulations," he said, calm as ever. "You're about to become very popular." "I don't want to be popular," I said. "I just want to be free." He looked me over with eyes that had probably seen every kind of family drama under the sun and replied, "Then don't tell anyone. Not even your family. Not yet." So I didn't. I called my manager at the clothing store and quit. I didn't even give 2 weeks, just said I needed to step away. The next night, I left the restaurant keys on the counter after closing and walked out without looking back. It felt like exhaling for the first time in years. The morning after I quit both jobs, I slept in for once. When I finally rolled over to check my phone, there it was. "Come home for dinner tonight. We want to talk. Mom." Just like that. No emojis, no hearts, not even a "how are you?" Just a command dressed up as a polite request. Something about it felt off. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Sure. What time?" I almost canceled 10 times, but curiosity won. When I pulled into their driveway that evening, it felt like stepping back into a role I didn't audition for. The silent daughter, the one who always did what she was told. But something was different. The lights were on. The table was set, fully set, like a holiday meal. I smelled pot roast, my dad's favorite. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. Daisy was there, wearing my old gold hoop earrings, the ones I'd lost 2 years ago and swore I never lent her. She smiled too wide, like a cat that knew a secret. Judith greeted me with a fake hug. My dad stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Wow," I said, looking around. "What's the occasion?" Judith poured me a glass of juice and set it in front of me like I was a guest, not their daughter. "We just wanted to check in, catch up." I sat slowly. Something in my stomach turned cold. They made small talk for 5 minutes. Daisy bragged about some new guy she met. My dad asked if I was still working those little jobs. Then came the bomb. Judith cleared her throat. "So, we heard some news." My spine stiffened. "What kind of news?" She glanced at Daisy, who was already grinning. "About your lottery win," Judith said smoothly, as if she were commenting on the weather. I froze. Daisy tilted her head. "So, what's my share?" There it was. No pretending, no hiding, just pure, entitled audacity. I blinked slowly and said, "I haven't even touched it yet." The room went still. The warmth, the fake smiles, all gone. My dad's voice dropped an octave. "Family shares with family." I looked him dead in the eye. Family also supports family, right? Where was all this warmth when I was working nights to pay my tuition? Judith's smile tightened. "Don't be dramatic. You know Daisy's had a hard time." I scoffed. "You mean failing out of school and maxing out 3 credit cards? That kind of hard?" Daisy's mouth dropped. "Wow, bitter much?" I stood up. "No, just done." I turned to leave. But before I could touch the doorknob, my father said quietly, "You're not the only one who knows people, Zara. Money doesn't make you untouchable." I stopped, turned, and said, "You're right. It just makes me free." Then I walked out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt dangerous. I should have stayed away. But part of me still hoped, even after everything, that maybe they'd come around. That they'd see I wasn't their servant or their wallet. That maybe, just maybe, this dinner would be different. It wasn't. The next night, I returned to their house. Not because I wanted to, but because Judith had called again. Her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from something rehearsed. "We need to talk again, Zara. Daisy's in trouble. Real trouble." Trouble. That word had followed Daisy around like a designer purse she didn't pay for. When I walked into the house, Daisy was on the couch, fake crying with tissues in her hand, her nails freshly manicured in glittery pink. My dad stood with his arms folded. Judith sat at the table, papers spread out in front of her. Credit card bills, eviction notices, something from a lawyer's office. "She's drowning," Judith said with a sigh, rubbing her temples like she was the one owed sympathy. "Credit cards, rent, and there's a lawsuit from a boutique she trashed during some influencer party thing." Daisy sniffled. "It was an accident." Judith continued, her eyes never leaving me. "She needs $2 million to clear everything. That would give her a fresh start." I nearly choked. $2 million? Raymond nodded. "That's not even half of what you won." "She's your sister," Judith added quickly. "And she's in crisis. You can help." I stared at them, baffled. She's been in crisis her whole life. Daisy rolled her eyes. "You're just jealous that people actually care about me." That did it. I stood up, my hands shaking. "I worked since I was 15. I paid my own tuition. I walked through snow at night to get to my shift at that crummy diner so I could buy textbooks. You were out clubbing with guys who paid your rent." Judith slammed her hand on the table. "So now you think you're better than us?" Raymond rose too, voice rising. "We gave you everything growing up." I laughed, bitter, sharp, loud. "You gave Daisy everything. I gave myself everything I have." Judith's voice cracked. "She's not built like you, Zara. She's delicate." "She's not delicate," I snapped. "She's lazy." For a moment, the room was silent. Even Daisy stopped pretending to cry. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. Raymond's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this." I turned my head just slightly. "I regret coming back here." And with that, I left. I drove home in a fog. The streets were blurry through my tears, but not from sadness, from anger. Anger so deep it sat in my throat like a rock. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted access. I was a vending machine to them now. Press the daughter button. Get $2 million. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. I parked, locked the door, and just sat in the car for a while, breathing, trying not to fall apart. The next morning, I felt a little clearer, still furious but calmer. I made coffee, checked my email, opened the blinds. Then I walked down to check my mailbox. The door was hanging open. At first, I thought maybe the wind did it. But when I looked closer, the metal was bent, forced open. My stomach dropped. I'd placed an envelope inside days ago, a copy of the lottery check I'd meant to drop at my safety deposit box but hadn't gotten around to yet. Gone. The envelope was gone. My hands trembled as I looked around. My heart pounded in my ears. I rushed back inside, locked the door, and ran to the closet where I kept the original, still sealed, still safe. But I knew right then, someone in that house, either Judith, Daisy, or my father, had stolen the envelope from my mailbox. And they thought it was the real thing. They had the copy. They thought they had power. I sat down on the floor and laughed through gritted teeth. Let them think they'd won. They were about to find out just how much I'd learned from being invisible all those years, and how dangerous I'd become now that they could finally see me. I stood in my living room, heart pounding. My mailbox had been forced open and the envelope was gone. I rushed to the closet, yanked open the shoebox where I kept the receipt for my safe deposit box, and clutched it like a lifeline. The real lottery check. The actual piece of paper worth $5.5 million was tucked away in a thick envelope, locked in a metal vault at the bank downtown. What was in the mailbox was just a photocopy, a harmless copy I printed for legal reference. Useless to anyone except maybe as a wall decoration, but someone thought it was real. I didn't have to guess long. That afternoon, as I scrolled through Instagram in a daze, Daisy's story popped up. A video. She stood in their backyard, dramatically holding an envelope over a fire pit. She smiled sweetly at the camera and dropped it in. Flames rose instantly, and she leaned close to the camera with a smug little smirk. The caption read, "Selfishness will burn." I stared at the screen for a long time, a hollow kind of anger brewing in my chest. I couldn't decide whether to laugh, scream, or drive over and flip their lawn furniture. But I did drive. 10 minutes later, I pulled up in front of my parents' house, heart thudding. No one was outside. The sun was setting, the air thick and still. The smell of smoke still lingered. I walked straight to the backyard without knocking. There, behind the tool shed, sat their rusty old fire barrel, still warm, ashes swirling lazily. Bits of paper curled at the edges, but most of it was blackened, unrecognizable. I bent down and spotted what I knew was once my check. My name faintly visible on the edge of the paper, half burned, half melted. Footsteps crunched behind me. I turned. Judith stood on the back porch, arms crossed. Daisy appeared behind her, sipping an iced coffee like this was all some casual afternoon activity. My dad hovered by the grill, pretending to look busy but glancing at me every few seconds. Judith's voice cut the air. "If you won't share, you don't deserve a penny." Daisy blew a bubble with her gum and let it pop loudly. "You could have avoided all this, Z. We tried to talk to you." I stared at them. I stared at the barrel. Then I laughed. Hard. I laughed so loud Daisy flinched. "You idiots," I said between gasps. "You absolute morons just burned a photocopy." Silence. Judith's face twitched. Raymond stepped forward, uncertain. "What?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapped it a few times, held it up. "This," I said, flipping the screen to show a picture. A time-stamped video of me dropping the real check into a sealed envelope and sliding it into my safe deposit box. "That was 2 days ago." Daisy's jaw dropped. Raymond looked sick, his mouth opening, then closing again. Judith's face flushed deep red like someone had slapped her. "You came into my home," I said, my voice sharp now. "You broke into my mailbox. You stole something you didn't understand and destroyed it thinking you had control." Judith tried to recover. "We were protecting Daisy. You were being greedy." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You were being desperate, and now you look like fools." Daisy's voice rose. "You're lucky we didn't call a lawyer." I snorted. "You burned a fake check that wasn't yours to begin with. Please, try me." Raymond muttered something about family values, but no one listened to him. I turned, walked toward the car, and looked over my shoulder one last time. "You know what's funny?" I said, not bothering to hide the venom now. "Even if it had been real, burning it wouldn't have gotten you anything. All you would have done is destroy your last chance at ever speaking to me again." Then I drove away. This time I didn't feel shaken. This time I didn't cry in the car. This time I felt like fire myself. Their voices chased me all the way down the driveway, shouting things like, "You'll regret this," and "You're tearing this family apart." But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I was done being afraid of them. I drove straight to Mr. Douglas's office. He had no receptionist, just him, a small wooden desk, stacks of files, and a ticking wall clock that sounded louder every time I visited. He looked up as I walked in, calmly set down his pen, and gestured for me to sit. "They burned the check," I said flatly, still standing. He raised an eyebrow. "The real one?" "No. The copy I told you about." He gave a satisfied nod. "Good. Sit down, Zara." I finally collapsed into the chair and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. "They stole it," I added, "right out of my mailbox." He opened a folder, pulled out a printed form. "I already filed notice of the winnings with the lottery office. The money is secured, transferring it will happen in stages. The trust account is locked tight. Even if they had the real check, they wouldn't be able to cash it." "And if they sue?" I asked. He looked up. "Let them." By the next morning, Daisy had done exactly what I expected, taken it online. Her Instagram story featured a selfie of her crying in the bathroom with the caption, "I can't believe how money changes people, my own sister, after everything I've done for her." It didn't stop there. She posted a long paragraph on Facebook about toxic siblings and narcissistic family members who get lucky and forget the people who carried them. She even tagged me in one post. The comments were split. Some people cheered her on. Others asked why a grown woman with fake lashes, weekly spa appointments, and 0 jobs needed $2 million from her sister. But things took a darker turn when I received a certified letter in the mail, sealed and heavy in my hands. They were suing me. The filing came from a lawyer I didn't recognize, but it listed all 3 plaintiffs, Judith, Raymond, and Daisy Miller. The claim? That I had verbally agreed to split the money equally because, quote, "family comes first." That I owed them compensation for parental support, emotional sacrifices, and shared household investment. Daisy's section even claimed she had inspired Zara to buy the ticket. I laughed when I read that part. Inspired me? She didn't even know about the ticket. But laughter turned to rage the deeper I read. They said I was ungrateful, that I'd benefited from years of family support and promised multiple times to help Daisy if I ever came into money. There were no texts, no recordings, just words, lies. But I wasn't defenseless. I returned to Mr. Douglas, documents in hand, old bank transfers where I'd sent my parents money for groceries. They said it was for rent, even when I was still a student. Messages where they guilt-tripped me for not bailing Daisy out of debt. I gave him copies of my therapy notes where I had logged years of emotional neglect, favoritism, and pressure to care for my sister. But the moment that sealed everything? Uncle Jeff. He was my mom's younger brother, quiet, reserved, and barely spoke at family events. But he had eyes. He had ears. When I called him and explained the lawsuit, he didn't sound surprised. He came by Mr. Douglas's office the next day with a manila folder filled with old letters, emails, and family group chats from over the years. Some from Judith saying things like, "Zara's strong, she'll survive. Daisy needs more help." Others from Raymond. "Don't waste time on Zara's graduation. She doesn't need praise. She needs discipline." And even one text from Daisy that read, "Zara's basically our family ATM anyway, LOL." Mr. Douglas read them all one by one, then looked at me. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "isn't just proof, it's a pattern. A documented history of how they treated you. Judges don't always care about emotions, but they care about patterns." I swallowed hard. "Do you think we'll win?" He gave me a small, rare smile. "I think they just handed you the match. Let's watch them burn down their own house." It started with one post. Just one. Daisy, furious that I wouldn't cave, doubled down on her heartbroken sister act and posted a sobbing video titled, "My sister won the lottery and left us behind." She sat in her bedroom, full face of makeup, soft lighting, a tiny violin track playing in the background. Fake crying as she told her followers how money had turned me into a monster and how I'd promised to share because we're sisters. Then she dropped the bomb. "She's taking our family to court." She forgot one thing. The internet loves underdogs, and it hates spoiled liars. By the next morning, her video had been reposted everywhere. Not because people supported her, but because they were laughing at her. The comments were brutal. "Girl, you didn't win the lottery. Sit down." "Imagine suing your sister for not giving you millions." This is why people go no contact with family. People began digging into her socials, piecing together her lavish lifestyle, her designer bags, her trips to Cancun, all while claiming she was struggling. Meanwhile, they found my quiet, nearly empty pages, just a few selfies, work pics, and books I'd read. The narrative flipped overnight. News outlets picked up the story. Woman wins 5.5 million. Family demands cut, then sues when she refuses. Lottery winner's sister burns check. Goes viral for the wrong reasons. One interview on a popular morning show called me the most patient big sister in America. And then it happened. A reporter from a national newspaper reached out to me directly. She asked if I'd like to tell my side. I hesitated, then said yes. We met at a quiet cafe and I spoke plainly. I was the invisible daughter. I worked 2 jobs to survive while they pampered Daisy. They always told me to be strong, so I was. And now that I have something of value, suddenly I'm supposed to share? No. This is what happens when you treat one daughter like a bank and the other like royalty. The article went viral within hours. Support flooded in. Comments, messages, even handwritten letters from women who had lived through the same thing. Some offered legal support for free. One small press reached out about a possible memoir deal. A popular podcast wanted to feature me on their Family Betrayal series. My inbox was full. For once, I wasn't invisible. But the backlash hit them harder than I ever could have planned. Raymond, my father, worked in upper management at a mid-sized consulting firm. The kind that doesn't like drama, or lawsuits, or national headlines about greedy parents. He was let go quietly, just downsized, of course. But I knew why. Judith, who thrived on church gossip and book club brunches, became the center of town whispers. She stopped posting on Facebook, stopped showing up for events. A neighbor told me she collapsed crying at the grocery store when someone called her entitled to her face. Daisy? She disappeared, deleted her Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Even her spam accounts. She stopped posting entirely. Last I heard, she'd gone to stay with a friend in Arizona to get her head right. They finally got quiet. As for me, I opened a small journal and started sketching out ideas for what a new life could look like. I started visiting apartments. Nothing flashy, just simple places with natural light and peace. I made a checklist. Quiet neighborhood bookstores nearby. No family within 30 miles. I even called a therapist and scheduled weekly sessions. I wanted to heal, to grow, to finally live without that anxious ache in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't planning around anyone else's needs, just my own. But then came the envelope. Thin, clean, white. It was from the court. The hearing was set for next week. Everything we'd prepared, the documents, the evidence, the therapy notes, Uncle Jeff's testimony. It would all come down to a judge in a quiet room. I took a deep breath and slipped the envelope into a drawer. It was almost over, but the hardest part still lay ahead. The courtroom was cold. Not just the temperature, but the energy. Quiet, tense, thick with eyes waiting to see how it would all unfold. I sat beside Mr. Douglas, dressed in a simple black suit. I didn't want to look rich. I wanted to look calm, controlled. The opposite of the chaos that sat across the room from me. Daisy dabbed her eyes with a tissue, already sniffling before the judge entered. Judith sat stiffly, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally ruined her church reputation. Raymond kept checking his phone, unable to meet my eyes. The judge walked in, a stern woman in her late 50s, sharp gaze that could slice steel. The case began. Their lawyer went first, dramatically explaining how I'd promised to share the lottery winnings with my family. He spoke about years of support, emotional investment, and verbal agreements made out of trust. Then Daisy took the stand. She cried immediately. "I've just been through so much," she said, her voice trembling. "Zara always said she'd help if she could. I was there for her growing up. We shared everything. I was shocked, hurt, when she said I didn't deserve anything." She sniffed. "I've been dealing with anxiety and mental stress, and now people online are calling me names. It's not fair." The judge nodded but didn't smile. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly and walked to the witness box. I worked 2 jobs since I was a teenager. I put myself through college. No one paid my rent or bought me a car. When I won the lottery, I stayed quiet. Not because I'm greedy, but because I knew what would happen. I've never been anything but the backup plan for this family. I love them, but I was never loved equally. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke the truth. Mr. Douglas stood for our final move. Your Honor, we have one last piece of evidence. He clicked a button. A video played on the courtroom screen. A recording. It was Daisy, voice clear, laughing on a call with a friend. I don't care what Zara says. I'll guilt her into it. I know how she is. She caves every time. Give me a week, she'll hand it over. Gasps rippled through the room. Judith turned slowly to stare at Daisy, who went pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge held up a hand. That's enough. Silence. Then she looked over her glasses and spoke. I find no evidence of a legal or verbal contract that entitles the plaintiffs to any portion of the winnings. In fact, the materials presented suggest a consistent pattern of emotional manipulation and entitlement from the plaintiffs toward the defendant. There is no legal obligation to share lottery earnings with family members simply due to relation. She banged the gavel. Case dismissed. It was over. Just like that. As we walked out of the courtroom, Judith caught up behind me. Her voice was low, seething. You'll regret turning your back on family. I turned to her, steady and unshaken. I didn't turn my back, I said. I just stopped kneeling. Daisy looked like she wanted to scream. Raymond was already halfway to the parking lot, pretending none of this happened. But I didn't care. I stepped into the sunlight, lifted my chin, and exhaled. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, entirely free. Not just from their expectations, from their guilt, their noise, their need. I walked to my car, turned the keys in the ignition, and drove away. The road ahead looked brighter than it ever had. I wasn't just wealthy. I was powerful. I was whole. And I was finally proud of saying no. If that ending gave you chills, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss a story like this again. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if your family tried to steal your lottery winnings? Share this with a friend who needs to hear. Saying no is powerful. More shocking stories are coming, but stay tuned.